We were constantly asking ourselves, like, what does the song need?
Yeah.
Not what do we want to do with it, but like,
We're in service to
how
it,
do we
you
tell
know?
this story that the song is, and how do we not get in the way?
Right, right.
Highlighting the lyrics and letting the lyrics work with the music is something we try to do live. But it was also just kind of our guiding light, that kept us, making some choices that we wouldn't have expected, and then also kind of deciding against some things that we thought, oh, I always wanted this or that on this song, and then you hear it, or you kind of hear where the song's going, and it's like, no, that doesn't. We
Right, right.
could, but it would just kind of dilute it.
Yeah, yeah. What's up, folks? Welcome to episode 130 of the Bass Shed podcast. My name is Ryan Roberts. How y'all doing, everybody? How y'all doing? A warm and friendly welcome to all the new listeners. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. Hit the subscribe button wherever you are listening to the podcast to get notified about the new episodes coming out each week. A couple episodes ago, I was asking you guys your thoughts. I was asking everybody their thoughts on the 5-string P bass. I'm really interested in getting one, right? I just haven't found the bass yet. I've talked to some pros, like getting feedback. Like, what do you guys think? What do you guys think? Mixed reviews on the nature of the 5-string P bass. But I want to know what you guys think. I'm opening it up. Drop me a line. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on the 5-string P bass. And if you own one, what is it? Send me a link. I want to check it out. All right, folks, I've been talking about it, right? I've been talking about it. The Bass Shed Academy is doing a Latin bass workshop, and that will be done by Mr. Oscar Cartaya. If you are in the Southern California area, we'll be at Collage, a place for art and culture in San Pedro. Again, that is October 26th. If you are not in Southern California, the event will be live streamed. So please stop by thebassshedacademy.org for more details. A little bit about the Latin Bass Workshop with Oscar Cartaya. Registration is $20. It's a $20 ticket, and proceeds go to the Global Arts Corporation. That is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to help support youth through music. This is an organization that's important to Oscar, and that's the point of the Bass Shed Academy, is to use the artistry and skills of pro-level, high-caliber bass players to give back and to enrich communities. So if you're interested in supporting youth music programs and learning Latin bass, join us. Join us on October 26th at the live stream or at Collage in San Pedro. Again, check it out at thebassshedacademy.org. Also coming up from the Bass Shed Academy is 2 events with Barry Green. Barry Green has several programs he does throughout the world that aren't necessarily bass specific, right? He uses the bass and his artistry to speak about humanitarian causes. On November 26th, we'll be doing a clinic masterclass at Los Angeles College of Music in Pasadena, California, and he'll be doing a lecture style workshop about the inner game of music, the book he co-authored back in 1986 that if you haven't read, it's a really solid read. It's super solid. Like, I got a lot out of that book. I read it long before I knew Barry, and so he's going to be doing a lecture about those ideas from the inner game of music at Los Angeles College of Music on November 21st. On November 23rd at Collage in San Pedro, Barry Green will be doing a clinic and performance. The performance is his program about the 4 elements of the earth. His wife will be narrating, there will be a media presentation, and he will be playing along as an underscore to all of it. It's a really hip presentation he does. So that will also be a live streamed event. Both events will be a live streamed event. November 21st and also November 23rd. Stop by thebassshedacademy.org for more details. Lemur Music, lemurmusic.com. Everything you need for the double bass. Check them out, folks. Check them out. Basses, accessories, preamps, amps. Stop by lemurmusic.com. Use the promo code TheBassShed, all one word, for 10% off.
Hi, this is Jerry Jamont. I want to tell you about my upcoming book of bass transcriptions, JJ's Jukebox, Volume 1. This is a collection of over 15 of my bass lines in standard notation and tablature. They are accurately done here by Ryan Roberts of the Bass Shed Academy. Each transcription is accompanied by a video where I talk about what was happening during the recording session, how I got involved, and how I approached each song. Stop by the BassShedAcademy.org to learn more about my book of transcriptions, JJ's Jukebox Volume 1, and purchase a signed copy of my memoirs, Make It Happen.
All right, my guests on the episode are Sam Misner and Megan Smith. Together they make up Misner and Smith. Megan Smith, who plays upright bass, and Sam Misner, who plays guitar, joined to form the NorCal folk duo. They came out with a new recording earlier this year titled All Is Song. Sam Misner and Megan Smith have been fine-tuning this record since 2017, making for a release that feels like a crisp and magical storybook from their own well-crafted instrumentals to lyrics. The album All Is Song is a beautiful search for humanity and a reminder that even in our darkest moments, we can be rescued through creativity. When I was listening to the record and making notes on it and preparing for this interview, I was pleasantly surprised. I was pleasantly surprised by some things I heard right out of the gate on this record. I highly recommend checking it out. Again, the album is titled All for Song, and I will have links to it in the show notes. All right, folks, and here it is. Here's my chat with Sam Misner and Megan Smith, who make up the Misner-Smith duo. Hey, how you guys doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing all right.
All right. Well, thanks for having us. Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for being on. You guys are up in North California, right?
Yeah, we're right near Sacramento and Davis, California.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of mid-state. That's considered northern?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I guess technically it's slightly northern, but it's...
I grew up here. It's North California.
Yeah.
Okay. The native chimes in.
Yeah.
All right.
We're a little bleary-eyed. We just got back we were up at the Alaska Folk Festival for our record release. I mean, it was kind of coincidence that we were up there for it, but worked out nicely. But it was a bleary-eyed week for sure.
They know how to do it up in Alaska. It was a lot of fun. Yeah. Music everywhere, bands all night long for like days on end.
Is that because it's night for days on end right now?
Yeah, right.
Well, is that just built in?
I think they go hard. But it's like timed. It's kind of like the beginning of spring for them too. So I think it's like the coming out of the dark and the cold, and so
and they're just about to hit like their cruise ship season, because I guess like that's a lot of what their economy is based on in the summertime is like these enormous cruise ships coming up through Alaska, and you know, they get like thousands of people docking there for the day and like hanging out in the bars and like the restaurants and stuff. So
Juneau also is only accessible by boat and by plane. It's the capital, but you can only get there. There's no roads in or out. So it's the whole state kind of descends on the town for the folk fest.
It was
week.
Fun.
Yeah.
Is that the first time you guys have performed up there?
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
Neither of us had ever been to Alaska either.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't feel like there's a lot of like reasons to go.
Well, yeah, it's not like you can,
like
book a big long tour.
Yeah, right. You can't hit a bunch of clubs.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. It's a really special spot, and like it's kind of a secret that it's that cool. I think. Nobody. I mean, we have a really dear friend who lives up in Juneau and grew up there and has moved back after being in Northern California for many years. So. He actually runs and owns one of the places that we played at during the weekend. And so, it was super fun to have somebody like give us the background on the place. And like, we learned a lot about the area and just about like, how what it's like to live up there. And there's just, everybody was so kind, and everybody was, handing us drinks all weekend. Like, let me buy you a drink. Let me buy you a drink.
It was also the first time Megan plays the upright bass and has one of those folding. Charlie Chadwick built these folding basses where the neck actually, maybe you've seen them. It actually folds into and then into a real big coffin case. And it was the first. We've had it for years, but it was the first. It was the Virgin Voyage.
Yeah,
putting on the plane, and so there was a little bit of like.
It worked.
But it worked. Yeah,
it did really well.
It made it.
It was nice to have my own bass.
Yeah, I bet. I do some fly dates, and like they rent me basses at different places, and you never know.
Yeah,
you never like every time I'm in Seattle, they rent me a 5-string, which is not what I normally play on.
Oh yeah,
wow.
On upright, and that's and I have 20 minutes to get comfortable on it, and then go.
Yeah.
It's like I heard somebody, I forget who said this, so forgive me if I'm quoting somebody and I don't know who they are, but I remember somebody saying that traveling without your own bass is kind of like speed dating or one night stands. Like you're like, okay, how does this work? How are we?
Right.
How do we work together?
Yeah.
And like, do we have good chemistry? And like, it's just a totally weird proposition.
Yeah, right, proposition.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's doing the proposal?
Yeah,
Like,
it depends on the bass.
Listen, if I don't have the bass, I'm just a person standing in the middle of the stage.
Yeah. Right. So you're doing the record release for the album, which is titled All Is Song.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so you guys, there was a big break in the recording process for you guys. Speak about why the break, and then kind of what was the motivation to start putting this record together?
Yeah, well, we were about scheduled to start recording in March of 2020, and some things happened right around then. And so that was the big delay, basically. And so we kind of pivoted to doing live stream shows from our living room, just sort of on a whim this night after our first show was canceled. And then it became this literally straight for a year, and then basically once a week for 2 years, every Saturday night, and kind of gained some community around. People were showing up, and we kept doing them. Well, showing up online. And and so we ended up finally getting back to the studio September 29th of 22. And we spent a full year, literally to the day, coincidentally. The studio where we recorded it is about an hour and a half, 2 hours drive away. So we'd go down for a couple days at a time. But basically that big break, was obviously forced on us to a certain extent. And then once we got back into the studio, finally, we were like, well, yeah, the impulse is to rush things, but like, we already waited so long. Let's do this right. So we really did, like, we weren't cutting corners. We weren't just rushing it out there. I think we wanted to make what we wanted to make and do it right. So
yeah, like what does the impulse to rush come from? It comes from that outer pressure of like content, like keep producing content, and we've always sort of resisted that a little bit because it feels like our creative process doesn't really align with that.
Right.
It doesn't. It works for some people really well, and it's fantastic for some, but especially on this record, it didn't really work for us.
I would be curious. I mean, obviously, there's no way to gauge it, but I'm not sure if it works for people. I agree. I think you can find some things, if people are putting out regular content all the time. Now, this is fascinating because I do this podcast regularly.
Right.
But when it comes to writing music and things that take, a little bit more preparation, to put together, it might not all be the same level of inspiration behind it.
That's so true.
Yeah.
You can just put things out to put things out, but then there's things that are really kind of deliberate. And that takes time.
Absolutely. And the difference between, we're creatures of live performance. We started in theater, as actors. And when we got together as a musical outfit, we kind of, continued that love of live performance is something that really bonds us. We really enjoy doing that. But when you get into the studio, as you know, it's a completely different animal. So, you have to kind of be open to what the studio is going to tell you about what you're doing. And just by definition, you have to take the time to listen, and you have to take the time to be that editor that you can't be while you're, doing live performance, while you're singing on stage, while you're playing on stage. That stuff, once it comes out of you, is gone. It's just like, it just disappears. So, in the studio, we gave ourselves time to really, it became more about crafting things and less about just like getting it done,
So this album is 15 tracks. And did you have all 15 kind of put together before entering into the studio, or were some of them, I was specifically the interludes, were those created in the studio?
Yeah, the interludes kind of, we hadn't planned on it before we got in there. And as we were kind of shaping the songs, two of the songs hadn't been written. I mean, honestly, if we hadn't had the delay, two of the songs may not have been written or even, ready to be recorded. But because we had that delay, we ended up having two extra songs. Not extra, but we added two more to the list.
I don't think of them as extra. Yeah. They're integral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the interludes, the two are Kerosene and Little Light. Yeah.
Okay.
Which couldn't be more different from each other, actually, which is kind of interesting. Yeah.
But those interludes, as we were putting the music together, and, it wasn't like we do one song and then move on to the next. We were kind of working on many at a time in the studio. And we just started thinking like, there's some themes that are running through this. There are some kind of common sort of images. We grew up, the albums that inspired us the most together and separately, often, I think a lot of people have that experience where it's like, it feels, you love all the songs, but you kind of know exactly what's coming next because you've listened to the album so much, it has a flow to it. So we wanted to start thinking of it as a whole piece, as in addition to just being, 12 songs plus, that's what we had to begin with. And then we started thinking of like, how could we kind of put these things, kind of tie them together, give them a little bit of like a palate cleanser between some songs.
It was like connective tissue. You know, it's like there were certain parts on the album that just needed something to bridge you from one listening experience to the next.
Yeah.
And it, again, you're in the recording studio, you're hearing that, you're feeling something like that. Yeah, there's something needs to be here that's not here yet.
Right.
And
right.
I don't know what it is yet, but like you have to be open to that and then try to attack that and create something that belongs,
And some of those, at least one or two of those interludes were actually created by, I think the first interlude is mostly vocal, and it's a vocal taken, two vocals taken in isolation out of a song that's later down in the track list. So I think interlude 1 technically has vocals from Silence of the Sun, which is, 7 or 8 on the track list. Right. But taking all the instruments out, it's just the vocals. So it kind of becomes its own element. And then there's an interlude at the end of the album that's just the strings, because we loved what was done with the string section on one of the tunes. So we took everything out and made it be its own thing.
Okay. And it was kind of a nod to like, so my background as a bass player is in classical music. When I grew up playing in an orchestra, and I went to school back in the day when they had like music programs still in the schools. And public schools. So I got to play, some pretty amazing music in my orchestra growing up, and then, took some lessons during college and, continued my studies. But what we kind of ended up building around was the bass parts that were Arco, the bowed bass parts. Our co-producer Bruce, who is an incredible arranger, and he's a master musician himself, but he created these string sort of arrangements, these quartets, string arrangements.
Wrote them and then we had
he wrote them.
Yeah.
But he sort of like built them around my bass parts that were already there. And so what happened was we sort of refer to them lovingly as like the Misner Smith quartet.
String quartet.
As sort of a nod to my like former experiences as a young musician in classical music. And then partnering a lot of those pieces of the interludes that are, actual music singing or playing. We also partnered that with like found sounds. So like, as kind of trying to uplift and kind of highlight the idea of all is song as the kind of master thesis for the entire album. When you hear, the crickets at the end going into the last song, way, way, way in the back, there's a siren. You can't hear it unless you have your earbuds on or something, or your headphones. Right. But like we hoped that would kind of come through, was that partnership with found sounds, things that you hear in like, the natural world. And
yeah, it was interesting because on interlude 1, to tie this into interlude 3 with the crickets, on interlude 1, it kind of, the first sounds you hear sound like birds.
Yeah. It's
it's
a recording
nature.
my dad made, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, he made a recording of I think it's a fox sparrow. Anyway, yeah. So
okay, is fox sparrow cited on the credits?
Yeah, one thing we overlooked. We hope they don't come after us.
Man, the publishing on that.
The fox sparrow people are going to come after us. Yeah.
But even within interlude 1, it kind of takes some dramatic shifts. So it's like you have this bird sound thing, and then there's a strong electronic component that sounds like a sound played in reverse. Like you would strum a guitar and then flip it in reverse in the studio.
Exactly.
We were in England. Let's see. I don't remember what year it was.
About 10 years ago.
Maybe 10 years ago. Yeah, probably. And we were in an incredibly old pub called the U pub, I believe it was called. Yeah. And like,
is that just north of the river? Is this in London? Because I think I've been there.
No, it's actually out in the country. It's one of those like
the Midlands?
One of the oldest pubs in the. I mean, they probably all say that they are, but but in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
And beautiful area, but and then they're kind of known for these.
They have these like antique kind of like sound making things. Anyway, one of them was called it was a polyphon or something. A polyphon. So like back in the day, it was like a music box basically, but big. And it was it was mounted on the wall. And people would put what they call tuppence, two pence in. They don't have tuppence anymore, but you put tuppence in, which you could get at the bar and make it go.
So it's like a jukebox from 15,
from like
17.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So she'd had that recorded for a long time, and
it's from that.
Yeah, so it's from that, and then played in reverse to give it that sort of psychedelic, sort of unusual sound. But it was cool to finally be able to use something that we'd always, it's kind of like reminding us of an experience that we had years ago,
and we wanted some distortion coming into Kerosene just because of the subject matter and because of how big a shift that is between Sadie's song and Kerosene. We needed a guide, like a sonic guide.
You needed a bridge.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
One thing I was curious about with the bird sounds at the beginning of interlude 1 and the crickets at the end of interlude 3 is it almost tells the story of a day. Because you wake up and there's birds, and then at night is when the crickets would come out. And so there's like this arc to the whole album. Was that purpose?
It's so cool. You're the first person that's mentioned that kind of connection.
I always thought of it like that myself.
Okay.
But because Little Light for me, and I don't know because Sam wrote Little Light and he wrote all the songs on the album, but like from the listener perspective or the co-producer perspective, I always thought of Little Light as like this kind of nighttime thing because you're talking about being in the earth, it's dark and looking for light, and then being out in the vastness of like space, and he says it much more eloquently than that. but that cricket sound, this idea of small things kind of holding like a universe within them, right? So the fact that the human experience can often feel like we're so small in this giant universe, but then also within each of us can be sort of this vast universe as well. So I wanted to play with that idea a little bit, and the crickets just seemed perfect for that. So yeah,
very cool. Where'd you get the recorded crickets from?
That was
right
at the studio.
Yeah.
I actually had recorded some crickets at our house in the valley, and they weren't as good.
They didn't make the cut. You're like, you gotta.
That's B Squad crickets. You can't have B Squad crickets. Like,
exactly.
Where's the A-listers?
Exactly. So we finally got the A-listers in.
Yeah, it turns out they were in the South Bay.
Yeah.
That's the only A-list thing in the South Bay.
Yeah, right.
So Anthem, the tune Anthem is the single off of the album, correct?
Yeah.
And that is track number, I'm looking at my notes here. You would probably know 13, excuse me. That's track
That sounds
13.
right.
Yeah. That has a really strong pop rock feel, which is a noticeable departure from a lot of
Yeah.
the other feels that are on the record. Um, in saying that, there is a very diverse scope of what's happening with
Yeah.
different feels and moods. I mean, track 1 comes out in 5/8, and then there's it's kind of interesting how it pairs with 6/8 throughout the tune. But
Totally.
I was hooked on that. I'm like, okay, 5/8. These guys are doing some things. I'm hooked.
Awesome.
I want to see where this goes. So there was a lot of different feels, but the single anthem is the most, I think, pop.
Yeah.
Rock feel.
It's one that we've had, and it was one of the first songs that was written, that was definitely written and ready to be recorded when we were supposed to start in 2020. Okay. And to finally be, we've been playing that song live as a duo and even as a quartet occasionally for a few years now. But to finally, even when we do it as a duo, it's not your standard folk song, and nor are we ever kind of standard folk or anything. But to finally be able to get into the studio,
that's a cool album title right there.
That is actually,
folk.
yeah. It was so great to finally be able to kind of lean into, like what you said. There's such a diversity of sounds and feels on the record. And we really did attack each song, not as, trying to shape it into what we wanted the record to be, but we wanted to give each song kind of their spotlight. Mm-hmm. So to be able to take Anthem and go, let's take it for its own sake, and putting in some B3, some Hammond B3, right. And being able to, the drum element was really a huge part of allowing us to kind of step into each song's kind of feel. But it was great to finally be able to give Anthem what we've kind of always pictured it as in our heads and go further with it. But to be able to kind of bridge to, in our minds, somewhat, it's kind of a bridge. There's a lot of acoustic guitar on it, but being able to layer in electric guitar parts and then the Hammond and other elements. And then when we get to the bridge with some strings, to really kind of go all out on that was so rewarding and exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. We got to the end of that one, and, we'd had Bruce on the lap steel, and we were kind of thinking like, this bridge kind of sounds a little bit Beatles-esque. Let's kind of lean into that. And the lap steel was perfect for that in terms of like this very George Harrison-y kind of feel. Mm-hmm. And Bruce just came up with this really like nice, simple hook on the lap steel, which really kind of like just brightens that whole part of the song, which I love. And then it comes back at the end. And then when we had finished kind of tearing everything apart, putting it back together, we were at the very end of the process. We kind of thought we were done with that song. And we were like, I think, we're pretty close to done. And then he was like, I'm hearing like a little conga, like maybe some vibes to like just like round the whole thing out and like bring it up just that little bit. And he sent over Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On," which is such a great, I don't know if we can swear on this podcast, but
hey, go for it.
Such a fucking great song. And
I mean, in relation to Marvin Gaye, all bets are off.
And so we listened to that in sort of that context, and we were like, let's try it. And so our drummer Dylan Votto also plays vibes, and so he came in and cut a couple tracks for us, and then he also played congas a little bit on it too. And so we were able to kind of like layer that in right at the end to kind of just like lift it even just that little bit more. And that's always the challenge. And it's always nice to be collaborating with people on stuff like this, because, three minds are better than one always, especially if you're having a good time working together, because, and we all worked so well together because it was, we thought we were kind of finished, but that last little bit of flair that Bruce suggested was really the finishing touch. And so, that was kind of how it was with all the songs. They're not all as, layered and complicated as Anthem, but
we were constantly asking ourselves, like, what does the song need? Not what do we want to do with it, but like,
we're in service to it.
How do we tell the story that the song is? And how do we not get in the way? Highlighting the lyrics and letting the lyrics work with the music is something we try to do live. But it was also just kind of our guiding light, that kept us, making some choices that we wouldn't have expected. And then also kind of deciding against some things that we thought, oh, I always wanted this or that on this song. And then you hear it, or you kind of hear where the song's going. And it's like, no, that doesn't, we could, but it would just kind of dilute it,
Yeah.
We'll be back right after this.
All right, the middle of the show is brought to you by the International Society of Bassists. ISB was founded by bass virtuoso Gary Carr and remains a leading resource for bassists. Stop by ISB World Office to learn more about their programs and get a copy of their magazine, Bass World. Again, isbworldoffice.com. Folks, the middle of the show is about building community. It's about building the bass community and letting the bass community hear from you. Stop by thebasshed.com. Click on Get Featured. Hit me up. Let me know what you got going on. You got some tour dates coming up. You just released a new album. You just released a new single. You have some content that you just created and you want to drive some traffic to it. Let me know. Get featured on the Bass Shed podcast. Stop by thebasshed.com and get featured on the Bass Shed podcast. Megan, it's interesting that you bring up the Beatles because I felt that while I was listening to it, but I couldn't pinpoint the Beatles reference. I left it out of my notes. Like, all right, I'm not going to talk about the Beatles when we talk about that. But because there was a couple songs like that. I mean, I would have to revisit my notes. Like, if I do, track 3, Threadbare.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like that had a Tom Petty, Dire Straits feel to me.
I love that you picked up on that. That's great.
Okay. Cool. Glad I wasn't insulting. Then
not at all.
No, it's great. I mean, these are all things we kind of, have in mind when the songs are created, but we don't have the extra arms to produce the sound, right? So when you get into the studio, that's the beauty of it. You can really stretch out. You can test the song. You can listen to it. You can elaborate and go through that adventure that you go through with every new song and get it to a place where you're like, oh yeah, I always heard Tom Petty, I always heard Dire Straits, but now I really hear it. Now I'm really getting it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
On that topic, track 2, Deep as Water. How is that guitar tuned? Is that DADGAD tuned?
No, that's actually just a 12-string Gibson Hummingbird 12-string. Yeah,
okay.
There's. I think as lush as that song sounds, I think it's basically the acoustic 12-string. There's a little bit of Rickenbacker 12-string, kind of highlighting some notes. Upright bass, drums. There's some strings, but it's as lush as it sounds. It's not an open tuning. Little Light and Sadie's song both have open tunings, DADGAD, but that jingle.
I'll reference like where my mind went on that one was Going to California by Zeppelin.
Oh, that's funny you say that because we have kind of a joke because we recorded, this is our 3rd album we've recorded there with Bruce, and a couple albums back we kind of had this joke. I can't even remember which song it was, but a couple of them we started joking about like acoustic Zeppelin, like it's like that, because you know what I'm talking about. There's like the heavy Zeppelin, and then there's like the acoustic Battle of Evermore, going to California. So there was definitely we talked about, along with Tom Petty and Dire Straits, was acoustic Zeppelin.
Yeah, and then later in the record, there's something, again, I can't pinpoint the tune, but there was one that reminded me of Paul Simon.
Oh, cool.
Are all of these groups personal inspirations to both of you?
Totally, yeah. Paul Simon.
Both separate and together. Like when we first started playing together, you know, I think there was a lot of common ground, especially with people like Paul Simon and everybody we've mentioned so far. But, you know, like we I don't know, we have very similar aesthetics in terms of where we come from, what our ears like, you know, what we kind of gravitate towards.
The harmonies for sure.
Yeah.
You know, that's always been kind of from the beginning what got us kind of thinking, oh, there's something special here, was the vocal blend. So Paul Simon, Simon and Garfunkel, you know, obviously, you know, Crosby, Stills and Nash, you know,
there's
all
another
of those.
one where I wrote down Neil Young as
yeah. Absolutely.
That's a big one, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, bonding over the 60s and 70s music that, you know, we both grew up listening to. We both had separate sets of parents, but both had great record collections. So, you know, again, bringing it back to like wanting to make, regardless of how people listen to music these days, singles, streaming, all that, we wanted to at least make an album, you know, in the way of like, I remember holding those records or holding the CD and opening it up and looking at the lyrics and, you know, having an experience that was tactile in addition to the music. So
it's like eating a really good meal. I remember the first time I bought my own record with my own money, it was Graceland. And I got it home, and I mean, I don't know that I did anything else that week. I just listened to that album and I was like devouring it, you know. There's a feeling when you get an album like that where you feel like it's so rich, but it's also cuts to the core of like what it feels to be. Like, it's one of those things where you're like, how did they know? You know, like how did they know how it feels inside me, right? And one of those albums for me is Graceland for sure. We hope that people kind of have a similar experience. Not that like Graceland's like a masterpiece, but you know, it's like, this is our little masterpiece. You know, we spent a lot of time and energy trying to make this as rich and full an experience as we can. With like an arc and with a journey in it. And we kind of we often talk about how like it's like a collection of short stories, you know. It's like this is if people want to listen to it that way, and if they enjoy listening to music that way, then it's there for them. For sure.
Maybe I should have led the interview with this, but how did you guys meet and become musical partners?
So we actually celebrated 20 years together as a band last month.
Congratulations!
Thank you. And as I'm sure you know, that's like 150 in band years. So you know, anyway,
I mean, in LA, you can't even get like 4 of the same people in the same room 2 weeks in a row.
It's like we're celebrating our 1 week anniversary as a band.
This rehearsal is going into hour 2. Let's celebrate.
So we were both working as actors, doing regional theater around the country. You know, you do a show for a couple months, you move on to somewhere else or go work another job for a little while. So we met at a Shakespeare festival in Berkeley. And then, you know, just friends, kind of did the shows and went separate ways. And a couple years later, we were cast in a show in a different part of California. And the show was about Woody Guthrie. I'd say a musical because it was full of music, but not like Guys and Dolls musical. But
more of a review style?
Somewhat. It wasn't like kitchen sink drama where it's like Woody with his family. You know, it was much more kind of, you know, it was all Woody's spoken and written words, kind of talking to the audience, incorporating songs.
The title is Woody Guthrie's American Song, which it kind of explains it. It's like it's all about his experiences traveling through the U.S. and how that influenced what he wrote about.
So we were in rehearsal for that, and there was one section of the play where our two characters, there's a bunch of harmonies, 5-part harmonies and stuff, but there was this one moment in the show where these two characters had an a cappella moment where we just sang 1 or 2 lines together in harmony. And after you have all this other instrumentation going on, it was kind of this beautiful moment. And we kind of looked at each other and we're like, wow, this is a really nice vocal blend we've got. And that was kind of the moment that kind of put us into thinking about singing harmonies together. And by the time that show ended a couple months later, and we were back in San Francisco, we sort of started falling into doing a few gigs. I had been writing songs for years, and so I had several that we started playing and some covers. And that was 2004, and we were juggling both theater and music for a few years, and we still do theater occasionally, but yeah, we kind of made the decision around 2008. It was like, let's really give this a go. There's big money in music, so
yeah.
Well,
and the Alaskan Folk Festival,
right.
Exactly. It's like
Coachella is second to that.
Exactly.
Oh,
exactly.
absolutely. And also just the immediacy of being a live musician. You have a lot more control over what you're sharing and how you create it. And
yeah, you're doing your own stuff.
You're doing your own stuff. And that is something we both really enjoy. So, and, again, during the pandemic, that was kind of key because we had the ability to go online and do streaming shows and keep our chops up, build a community, have people who would come to the shows online and feel included. And, we all felt like it was like a thing we were all building together. And so that's why we're in this business. It's communication through art. Sure. That's exactly what we wanted to do with theater. And that's what we do with music.
Wow.
And then in those early days when you guys are realizing like vocally, this is a solid connection. Megan, were you playing bass right away or were you just singing with the songs?
I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. That's a good question because I did go to music school at University of Oregon and I studied bass and I studied voice. And it was, it was like a conservatory setting and it was very cutthroat and very intense. And when I came out of there, I was sort of done with music. I was just really tired. I got burned
out. Music school will burn you out on music. Yeah. If you want to be a musician, don't go to music school.
Well, at least for me, that was true. And so I just quit music. I focused on theater. I did some traveling, doing, regional theater and moved back to the Bay Area, started, my career there. And then with this Woody Guthrie piece, they had a live band on stage, which was really fun. Really excellent musicians from the local area up in Nevada County, where we did the show. And they had a bass on stage as part of the string band. It was like a mandolin and a guitar and a stand-up bass and a fiddle, maybe. And so one of the songs they had asked, anybody in the cast, can you play? Like, what can you play? And I was like, well, I used to play the bass, Yeah. And then I got up and played it and it was like riding a bike. And I was like, oh man, I do miss this. I really like playing the bass. And so that was kind of it. And my younger brother, who was 10 years younger, at that point he was playing the bass, but he'd sort of quit. And so we had this like random bass back at my parents' house that was just sort of sitting there. And so I enlisted one of my good friends with a truck and we went and we captured the bass and brought it back to my apartment in San Francisco. And that was it. And then I just kept playing after that.
Yeah. Which also as a duo, which we do most of our shows, it's such a great full spectrum that you can get with the acoustic guitar and the bass. You got the low end. Yeah. The way I play guitar, I'm kind of the drummer and we're the rhythm section.
Right.
And so we can do a lot with two people and two voices. So, yeah.
Right. And, so how long into working together did the bass join the band? Was it immediate? Like, cool. First
right
rehearsal,
at the
bass.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I would say
that's true. We probably did one open mic.
Yeah. We probably did a couple gigs where it was, two voices and a guitar, but I think we soon realized like we can do a lot more with the bass and
I just wanted to play.
And Megan wanted
to get back into it.
Yeah.
We
just needed a car that it would fit in. So then once that happened,
that's always the thing.
Yeah.
I was sort of freshly inspired too, because with the classical background, it was always the notes on the page, and Sam's background is very much in the mentorship, like, playing with a lot of people, learning that way. So I sort of had to trust my ear because there was nothing, we didn't write anything down. It wasn't, there were no notes on the page for us. We were just kind of like building this sound together. Sure. And so I had to rewire my brain a little bit and figure out how to play that way.
Right.
Which was a real nice challenge I like to sink my teeth into. And it ended up paying off for me too.
How did you approach that? Did you just really rely on your ears, or did you get into studying harmony a little bit more? So if Sam says, like, I'm playing an A minor and then we're going to F major, the notes and the chords?
All of the above. I think what I tried to do at the beginning was just hang on by my nails because I'd never sung and played before. That was new for me. I was always separate. So that, I think I don't know. I feel like it's easier playing guitar and singing.
Oh yeah.
When you play bass. Yeah. Well, and also just like the bass is a melody instrument. I consider the bass a melody instrument. I feel like it's supportive, but it's also very melodic, and you kind of need to know like dynamics and all kinds of stuff. Like, bass players are incredibly dynamic players. Good ones are. So I wanted to be that kind of player. And so singing and playing, it was kind of like tapping my head and rubbing my belly a little bit. And I had to sort of I had to build some new synapses in order to do that. So it was a lot of just like playing stuff over and over and over again, trial and error. I did learn to trust my ear more. I did learn to be more expressive and get out on the edge of things a little more. And with this record, I think the great thing about playing the bass is you're never stop learning. And I think with this record, playing with the drummer that we had on this record, I even got better at doing that. So I'm really proud of my bass playing on this record and how much the year in the studio really helped me evolve as a bass player. I really got some more more time to experiment in the studio, which, just always makes you a better player. So I really enjoyed the process a lot.
Yeah.
Is this, excuse me, is this record the most time you spent in the studio recording a record?
Absolutely. Yeah, no question about it. I think by far, and yeah, by several months for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And worth it. I mean, it was, at times it was a little bit just overwhelming, and you're kind of like, where are we now, or what are we working on? But
yeah.
But that time, it's funny because there's several kind of themes on the album, and one of which is time. Threadbare is all about time being relative and how it can feel long and short at the same time. And any time you've spent in the studio, you realize how malleable time is. Not to mention expensive, but
yeah, there's a reason there's no clock in the studio.
Yeah,
yeah, right. It's like a casino.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the house always wins.
Right. And there's no free drinks.
Yeah, exactly.
You gave yourself a bunch of time, but then at a certain point, because anytime anybody's in the studio, you can be like, well, let's rework it. Yeah. I don't know. Is that it? I don't know if that's it. And you just keep trying stuff.
Yeah.
And then you can run a tune into the ground, and your ears are fatigued from hearing it. And because you're bored of hearing it the same way, you're looking for something new to put in there, even though it doesn't need it. Did you have to just eventually kind of, okay, we're done.
Yeah.
We're done. We need to move on. Or, okay, let's wrap this up in a month or whatever it might be, so that you wouldn't go down that rabbit hole.
That's a really good question. Yeah. And I think it's something we did talk about as the two of us, and then with our co-producer, Bruce, who was fantastic. We were all, we had that same conversation where
like organizing workflow into sort of plateaus,
so that working towards plateaus. And also, because we had many songs to work on, we didn't work one to death before we started the next one. So we kind of would somewhat bounce around to kind of get things to reach different plateaus.
Okay. Towards
the end, I think there was a little bit like you described, like, wait a minute, is this boring now? Do we need more?
Right.
But we relied a lot on Bruce's kind of slightly outside of our bubble, even though he was in it with us. But because we're so close to each song more than anyone. It was great having, if anyone's worked in the studio,
voice of reason, kind
exactly,
of.
who can say like, you know what, I think you could do it better, or you know what, I know you want to do it again, but we've got what we need. Let's not, let's not try to work it more. If you really want to, we can, but I think we've got what we need. And to be able to have someone in there that you trust for both of those statements, like you could do it better. That's great to have someone to say that, but to have someone go, you know what, let's call it right here. You guys got the take. So that was great to have that kind of input.
There's a lot of trust, I, for Kerosene, I picked up the electric bass guitar. I've never played the electric bass. I only have ever played the upright. It was like a different beast completely. And it was
What'd you think?
Well, I love it actually. I think the thing that I loved the most about it was the kind of like sustain and dampening things you can do on it, which you really can't. I mean, you can do some of it on the acoustic. You can do a lot of it on the acoustic bass, but it's harder, and it's not as like immediate, because an electric instrument is so facile and responsive that you do something, you immediately get a response. So
and it's just easier to navigate, right? The scale is a lot shorter. The strings aren't,
Yeah, and I got a short scale bass. I got a short scale bass. Like a Epiphone viola. I think it is. Yeah. So and that was fun, but like I worked really hard on that bass line for a chunk of time when we were working on Kerosene. I came in, I laid down the track. It took me a long time. And, once I've got the bit in my teeth, I'm the kind of person in the studio who will keep going until you tell me to stop. Like I won't stop until somebody gives me permission to.
Yeah.
Because I know I can always do better. And in my background, like that's just how I was trained. So it was really helpful to have these two.
It's funny, sorry to interrupt, but it's funny how like weird personality quirks come out in the studio. Like some cats will just be like, "No, we're good." And we haven't even hit record yet. Oh, okay. And then others will just run it into the ground. No, I got it. We can punch you. No, it has to be one take. I got this. Put me back in. And you have the obsessive, and then the ones that just don't really even check in at all.
Totally. Yeah.
Hilarious. I agree, and it's like you're totally right. It reveals a lot about you. The studio will reveal. We had this joke. I don't know if you remember that old movie, Never Ending Story, like way back in the day.
I remember hearing about it. I always used to make jokes that it was only an hour and a half long, and I thought it was false advertising. Yeah.
Exactly. That's a good joke. I never heard that one. So like at the end, the main character has to like face all these sort of like, it's like an adventure movie. He has to face all of these tests, right, to his character. And the biggest test is just him looking in the mirror and seeing his true self. And I always used to joke that that's what the studio is that some, the line is something like some men, can overcome it. Some are driven mad and run screaming, and it's like, that is the studio for sure. And I know like people are like, really, is it that intense? And I'm here to say, yeah, it's really, it really is an experience where you are forced to look at who you truly are as a musician and then work with that. There's a lot of challenging yourself, but there's also acceptance of who you are. There's also inspiration that comes from that, where you're kind of like, I had no idea I could do that, because the first time I attacked the Kerosene line with that bass, I did okay. But, at the end of the day, we spent 6 hours on that line, and Bruce was like, I think it's decent. I think you did a good job. I think you can do better,
Okay.
And I kind of knew that, but I needed someone else to tell me that. And so, went back and we rehearsed it differently. We actually rehearsed it together with the electric and the bass together, which really helped the groove and helped kind of like the flow. And when we got back in, like I was able to nail it. Like I really felt it in my bones again. So, but you need to be able to take that on if you want to do the kind of work where when you walk away from it, it feels this good,
Sure. And that's obviously the important part, because if you feel it, then the listener will feel it, and those things are are
Totally.
transferable. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's an interesting. Well, let's talk about the thesis of the record. All is song. How did that come to be? Where did that come from?
Sure. It was the last lyric I wrote, honestly. And Little Light, it comes from the song Little Light. Which,
by the way, just to interject quickly, is track 15 on the album. And when you finally hear it and you're listening to the record on a whole, at least for me, it felt like a reveal at like an M. Night Shyamalan movie. It's like, oh, there it is. Okay. Okay, great. Now he was dead the whole time? What the hell? Yeah. Yeah, that was great. It felt like a reveal at the end of the thing. It was well placed.
Oh, that's so cool to hear. I love that. That's a great pull quote.
Yeah.
M. Night Shyamalan. I like that.
Oh, it's fantastic.
That song was the last song that I wrote, and it was kind of being finished while we were in the studio working on other songs. And in fact, there was no chorus to the song. It was just, couldn't come up with a line. I wasn't sure. Maybe it's just instrumental, that part. And one day I was tinkering on the song at home, and that line came into my head. I was like, "Oh, this really works here, actually." And as we were still playing with an idea for a title of the album, it kind of, after I wrote that, we both were talking about it and was like, God, maybe that's the title of the album, actually. Yeah. So in that way that it felt, it wasn't planned from the beginning, but it's sort of like so much on this album, it feels like it revealed itself to us. I finished writing the song, that line finally came, and then it was like, this is what this album is. That's what we've been making.
Well, and the production on that last song is so bare. And I think that was really intentional because we wanted that quality of like just stripping away all of the other things that we'd said and done on the album to this like really specific feeling that comes with that song.
It's also
that's the only one that we tracked with his vocal and guitar at the same time in the same room. We didn't separate that out.
Yeah.
And we like had fun with it because we did I think we put up like all these, Bruce had these fairy lights, these little white fairy lights, and we like put them up all around the room. We dimmed all the lights. We like got it kind of dark in there and nice and kind of set the tone.
Yeah. Crack a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
might have been whiskey, maybe.
Yeah. We all are very fond of whiskey, but so like I think that was like a big part of how we captured that song was that feeling behind it too, and
it was also the last one that we tracked.
And it was the last one we tracked.
There was plenty other songs to work on, but it was also, I was just kind of finishing it. And so it did kind of sum up our time in the studio, not intentionally so, but when we finally were starting to record that one after we'd been, such lush arrangements on some songs, a lot of electric guitars I was playing, strings, all that. And then, to have a song kind of finish up the album with basically one guitar, two voices, and a harmonium that Megan played. And quite simply, so like that, it became this, again, revealing, sums up where the journey that we've all been on, if you listen start to finish.
And in terms of the sequencing of the album, it was interesting too, because we actually got, a friend of ours, Jeff Kazer, who is in a band called the Crooked Jades. And he was the producer on our record a couple records ago, 7 Hour Storm. And so we called him up and we were like, could you sequence this for us? Because we are so close to this. Like, I don't know. We'll probably bury one deep in the album that like probably should be up front. And we don't know what to do. Like, we don't know what's right. We just, we've been so in the weeds with this thing that we needed somebody on the outside to kind of, and he's a brilliant, like he's a musicologist, like he's a DJ, he's a musician, he's a producer. He's an amazing artist. So we really trusted his ear.
Yeah.
And that was the one stipulation we had, was like, we really think Little Light finishes the thing. I think that's the last track, and he ended up agreeing with us, but he did a bunch of different sequencing. And the one we went with was, I think his favorite one was number 8. And that was the one we went with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, is that was the version of Sequences?
Exactly.
That's right.
That
Yeah.
was the eighth version. Okay.
But he had said, like, this is my favorite. If you guys want to do something different, I have a few other options. And, he took it seriously. It was like 2 or 3 weeks where he was listening and trying different things. Again, we didn't want to rush him. We knew he would devote every ounce of his attention to it. And when he first sent it to us, we were like, wow, Compose is number 1. Interesting.
We never would have done
then as we listened
what
to it,
what would you have chose as song 1?
I think we were back and forth between, like, Threadbare probably seems like kick it off with some nice hooks.
Right.
There might have been
also just to like break out of like what people think of us as a folk duo. We wanted to like upfront show people that, like, we're pushing ourselves a little differently on this record. Yeah. But for some reason, the more we listened to that sequence that Jeff did, the more it was like, I'm so glad we didn't bury Deep as the Water and Compose late in the album. I'm so glad they're the introduction, because they're the perfect way to get into it.
Yeah.
And sort of move through the first part of the record. And I can't imagine it being any different now. It just, it sounds like such an insane proposition to
switch it up,
do it any other way.
Yeah. And the fact that he had those interludes to play with too, he was excited by, where do I put those, and what songs would benefit from a little bit of a palate cleanser and things like that.
Sure.
So, yeah.
An interesting thing within the order of the songs for me was Kerosene coming after the first interlude. And then automatically, while I'm listening to Kerosene, I'm like, what's going to be next? Are we going to stay in this kind of funky thing? Are we doing a whole shift of sound? And then I'm like, wow, maybe each interlude means like we're transitioning to 3 different sounds here.
Yeah.
That was really interesting. And it kind of gave me some excitement going into track 7, which did not stay funky, but it was with the interlude ending with that reverse sound thing. And then it goes into just a changing. Like, wow, okay. This it added a lot of intrigue.
That's awesome. Good. That's so good to hear. That's what we were hoping for, and also, just
get ready.
Get ready. Yeah. And just helping the flow is helping, thinking of it as a whole piece. How do we help that?
Sam and Megan, thanks so much for being on.
Oh, our pleasure. Thanks so much for having us. A lot of fun.
Fantastic album. Fantastic album.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great questions. It was really nice talking to you. Yeah.
Really appreciate you taking the time.
Yo, this is Craig Gash. Subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on the Instagram, the YouTube. Leave us a comment.
All right. That was my talk with Sam Misner and Misner Smith. Again, the album is titled All for Song, and I guarantee you will not be disappointed. This is a fantastic new record. Check it out. That's about all I got for this one, folks. That's about all I got. That about wraps her up. Any Lebowski fans will get that reference. I will catch you on the next one, folks. I'll catch you on the next one in a minute.